The railroad princess and the man who couldn't pay for fake pearls. Have you ever wondered why those born with every privilege in the world are often the ones who pay the highest price for their naivety? Behind every gilded age fortune lay ambition, risk-taking, and strategic genius. But for Helena Zimmerman, that fortune didn't bring freedom. It turned her into prey. A perfect prey. Beautiful, young, educated in Europe, and most importantly, the sole heir to a railroad and oil empire. Helena's father, Eugene Zimmerman, wasn't the kind of randomly rich man who got rich by luck. He was the embodiment of the American dream in its most ruthless form. Before we delve into today's story, let's explore why Helena Zimmerman ended up in this situation. Does money truly bring security? Is her noble title more trustworthy than a father's intuition? If it was all a lie from the start, why did Helena stay? How much money is enough for someone who doesn't know when to stop? If you've lost 30 years, would you dare to leave? And is it ever too late to start over? Would you choose tide or peace? Let's continue to find the reasons behind the story, and the surprise will be at the end of the via. I believe it won't disappoint you. A teenager rejected from the Union Navy for being too young, but persevered until he was accepted. An officer survived after his ship was hit by a Confederate torpedo thrown into the Yazoo River, then should have died. But he didn't die. He returned to the fight. He participated in key battles such as St. Charles and Duval's Bluff. In the Vicksburg campaign right in his hometown, Eugene commanded a gunboat breaking through the Confederate blockade with the recklessness only found in those who would either die young or become legends after the war. He left the military at age 20 with leadership experience, risk assessment, and survival instincts that no business school could teach. And then he did what very few people do at the right time. He invested in oil when the industry was in turmoil, and sold it to John D. Rockefeller at the most opportune moment. In 1874, Eugene sold his oil assets to Standard Oil, not just for cash but also for shares and a seat on the board of directors. From there he moved into railroads, not small scale, not experimental. He became president of the Cincinnati, Hamilton, and Dayton Railroad, and then controlled a series of routes in the Midwest and South. By 1900, Eugene Zimmerman was worth $10 million, equivalent to over $280 million today. Helena Zimmerman was born on September 25, 1878, into a family so wealthy that even robber barons were wary of her. But the first tragedy came early. When Helena was only 4 years old, her mother, Marietta Evans Zimmerman, died of peritonitis. That loss changed everything. Eugene, now his only daughter, decided to send Helena to France to study, not to show off, but to prepare her for the world of the international elite, where money is not enough and sophistication determines survival. In Europe, Helena was trained like a true aristocrat: horse riding, fencing, swimming, languages, social etiquette. She became the epitome of a perfect American heiress by 1900. Helena returned to high society with the appearance of a handsome blonde belle, young, charming, and completely unaware that she was being watched, because somewhere in the masquerade balls there was a man who didn't see Helena as a woman. He saw a walking bank account, and he bore a title that sounded incredibly impressive: the 9th Duke of Manchester. But behind that title lay a secret Helena had never been warned about. The bankrupt Duke, a title built on debt and desperation. What Helena didn't know was that the man pursuing her had been living off wealthy families long before he met her. That man was William Angus Drogo Montague, the 9th Duke of Manchester, a title that sounded powerful, but in reality it was just a facade for generations of bankruptcy. He inherited the title at the age of 15. And for the next 8 years, the only thing he learned was not estate management, not aristocratic responsibilities, but the art of surviving on other people's money. The Manchester family had long since squandered their fortune. The previous dukes were famous for hosting lavish banquets for the Prince of Wales, spending as if money were limitless, and marrying for hope, not for reality. His father, the 8th Duke, married Consuelo Iznaga, a Cuban heiress, but failed to secure the dowry he expected. When William succeeded to the throne, He reportedly knelt before the Prince of Wales to beg forgiveness for his family's financial embarrassment. A moment of humiliation shaped his entire being. From then on, he understood one thing very clearly. Without money, titles are just paper, and if he wanted to live like a duke, he needed to marry money. William Montagu didn't seek love, he hunted in the late 19th century. His name became infamous in both England and America as one of the most brazen fortune hunters of the era. In 1897, he unilaterally declared his engagement to another wealthy heiress, who was completely unaware. The girl's father, Ogden Gwallet, was so enraged that he declared before high society, "I would rather see my daughter dead than become the Duchess of Manchester." That statement should have been the final warning, but William didn't stop there. The list of wealthy women with whom he was almost engaged was so long that the press later published photographs of him surrounded by portraits of 22 women, whom he was said to have pursued, 22 opportunities, 22 potential accounts, 22 failures, until he saw Helena Zimmerman, a young American girl, the only daughter of a railroad tycoon, raised in Europe, motherless and yearning for a place in the old aristocracy. For William, Helena wasn't the 23rd woman, she was the perfect target. When rumors of the relationship reached Eugene Zimmerman, he immediately recognized the danger. Not because he despised the title, but because he understood the books. Eugene saw a duke, nearly bankrupt without a stable occupation, wandering between acting, journalism, and party, and with a history of approaching heiresses as a business strategy, he strongly objected, and he did what a strategist always does, stall for time. Eugene forced Helena to return to Cincinnati, hoping the distance would reveal William's true nature, but Helena was too deeply involved. In November 1900, she returned to England, lived this time with a guardian, but without her father. And that guardian was quickly seduced by William with his charm, his feigned poverty, and the promise of a glorious aristocratic life. On November 14, 1900, Helena Zimmerman married in secret at Marylebone Church, London. There was no father, no mother-in-law, no formal ceremony, only haste. Both families learned the news through the newspapers, and just weeks later, Helena would understand that the man she had just married couldn't even afford a fake wedding gift. The fake pearls scandal, when the marriage showed its true value, that secret marriage, less than a month old, exposed its true nature in a way that was both humiliating and symbolically cruel. December 1900, just weeks after the wedding, William Montagu, the new Duke of Manchester, decided to buy a gift for his young wife. Not a lavish royal gift, not an heirloom diamond, not a rare jewel. He bought 3 strings of fake pearls. From Frederick & Company on Broadway, New York, price $695. Even in 1900, that wasn't a large sum for a duke, not even significant for a man who had just married a millionaire heiress. But William Montagu didn't pay. It wasn't a matter of forgetting. It wasn't a delay due to procedural issues. It was simply, he didn't have the money, and he was used to having others pay for him. In 1901, Frederick & Company officially sued the Duke of Manchester for failing to pay for counterfeit jewelry. The Evening Express published the story with a historically insulting headline, "Imitation Jewelry. The Duke of Manchester Sued. Counterfeit Jewelry. The Duke of Manchester Sued." For high society, this was more than just a lawsuit. It was a public farce. A duke, none able to afford real pearls, and even unable to pay for counterfeit pearls. Those 3 strings of pearls became the perfect metaphor for Helena's marriage, outwardly sparkling, bearing a noble title, but inwardly, completely empty. Helena was photographed many times wearing pearls at social events. No one knew whether those were the infamous strings of pearls or not, but that no longer mattered. Because now the truth was beginning to emerge in an undeniable way. Helena had married a man whose entire identity was a lie. The title was real, but the responsibilities were not. The demeanor was aristocratic, but the finances were abysmal. And worse than poverty, he had ambitions far greater than his ability to pay. Helena didn't know that at the time, but her experienced father did. Eugene Zimmerman, with the instincts of a seasoned industrialist, never bequeathed his entire estate to his daughter. He established trusts, complex legal structures, to prevent his son-in-law from directly accessing the assets, a fence, a layer of protection. But Eugene underestimated one thing. A man who lives by deception will never stop just because of the law. William Montagu didn't need ownership, he only needed the money. And somehow he convinced Eugene to continue funding his daughter's lifestyle. The money poured in, the parties began. In 1903, Eugene bought Kylemore Castle in Ireland as a wedding gift for the couple, a dream castle, and for William, a perfect stage to burn money. The parties lasted for days, noble guests, lavish hunting one weekend. The Duke and Duchess's entourage shot down over 1,000 pheasants just to show off their status. No Versailles needed that level of extravagance, but the bills still came, and Helena, the woman bearing the title of Duchess, began to understand a cold truth. She was not married to a man. She had become a source of funding. Castles, debts, and decline. How he burned through a dynasty from the beginning. William Montagu made no secret of how he spent money. He spent like someone accustomed to never facing the consequences. Kylemore Castle, a wedding gift from Helena Zimmerman, was not a home. It was a showpiece. There, William held lavish hunting parties that lasted for days, where the nobility gathered, wine flowed like a river, and money vanished. Helena appeared alongside her husband as the Duchess of Manchester, but increasingly she became a mere ornament for a lifestyle she could neither control nor stop. Eugene Zimmerman, not because he believed his son-in-law had changed, but because he did not want his daughter to become a laughingstock of society. But no estate could withstand this kind of spending forever. Just 5 years after acquiring Kylemore Castle, by 1908, William was forced to sell his Irish estates. Spending had gone beyond all limits. During World War I, Kylemore Castle was mortgaged to pay off debts, and by the 1920s it was sold off completely. The ancestral estate of the Manchester family, Gimbolton Castle, also began to tremble under the weight of debt. In 1915, William Montagu was officially declared bankrupt, not in silence, not discreetly, but a public event exposing the full extent of irresponsibility and criminal financial management. From then on, William lived most of his time abroad, not for tourism, but to escape creditors. He constantly devised desperate schemes, borrowing, cheating, begging money from wealthy friends, and exploiting any connections that were still willing to engage with him. Meanwhile, Helena lived in a marriage that was extensively documented in the press as a series of public affairs. William made no secret of his relationships. His name appeared in gossip columns so often that betrayal became a habit. 30 years, Helena endured. Hemifre, human, and her reputation dragged down along with her husband. The property that should have provided security became a prison. It financed William's lifestyle while gradually draining Helena's spirit and finances. They had 4 children, and that is what made it impossible for Helena to leave easily in that era. A divorced duchess not only lost her husband but could also lose her social standing. But William didn't stop there. In 1935, just 4 years after divorcing Helena, he was sentenced to 9 months in prison at Hem Prison, Wormwood Scrubs, for fraud. He had made false statements to obtain money from a pawnbroker. This was no longer extravagance. This was a crime. And it raises a chilling question. If he could commit fraud after divorce, how many illegal acts had Helena unwittingly covered up during their 31 years of marriage? By that point, the truth could no longer be concealed. William Montagu was not a fallen nobleman. He was a swindler in crown. And Helena, the woman who had given him both her youth and her fortune, finally reached a point of no return. Divorce, ruin, and the moment. She finally escaped after more than 3 decades. Helena Zimmerman's marriage and William Angus Drogo Montagu was beyond saving. No money, no honor, no pretense left. 31 years with a man who had squandered her fortune, openly betrayed her, and finally revealed himself to be a true swindler. By December 1931, Helena finally filed for divorce. The official reason: continuous adultery and extravagant spending. But those cold legal words could not fully describe the extent of the devastation. When the marriage ended, almost nothing remained of the empire that Eugene Zimmerman had built with his entire life. Helena walked out of her marriage at age 53, no longer the youthful heiress, no longer the iconic American heiress, but a woman who had been drained both financially and emotionally. And then, William Montagu did one last thing to prove that Helena was right to leave him. Just days after the divorce, on December 17, 1931, he remarried to the stage actress Kathleen Dawes. No time for regret, no sign of grief, not a moment of reflection. The 31-year marriage was just a chapter already explored. But what society didn't expect was that Helena didn't disappear. She didn't retreat into seclusion. She didn't collapse. She didn't accept the ending of the story in the role of a victim. People thought that at that age, after so many years of exploitation, Helena would live the rest of her life in silence and bitterness. But they were wrong, because what Helena inherited was not just money. She inherited her father's will to survive. A second marriage, real love, not a title for sale at 53. After 31 years in a marriage built on lies, debt, and humiliation, Helena Zimmerman faced a stark reality. She had lost almost everything except the right to choose her life again. High society no longer expected anything from her in their eyes. Helena was finished. A once wealthy heiress, drained by a bankrupt duke, entered middle age with a heavy past, but Helena no longer sought status. Neither did she need a title this time, she just needed a decent man. And then, in 1937, Helena met Arthur George Keith Falconer, not a fortune hunter, not a man who lived by appearances. He was a professional soldier, educated at Eton, who had served in the Boer War and World War I. No scandal, no debt, no fraud. A man whose past was built on discipline and honor, not on unpaid bills. On November 23, 1937, Helena married for the second time in Edinburgh. No secret, no rush, no escaping family. This was not a marriage to save face. This was a conscious choice between two adults. Helena became Countess of Kintore, but for the first time in her life, the title was no longer a burden. She left the 3 mansions associated with her previous failed marriages to move to Keith Hall, her new husband's ancestral estate in northern Scotland, and it was there that Helena began living the happiest years of her life. No more meaningless parties, no more bills piling up, no more prying press, only silence, respect, and a husband who treated her as a life partner, not a source of income. The contrast between her 2 marriages couldn't be clearer. Her first husband couldn't afford fake pearls and ended up in prison. Her second husband spent his entire life in the military and gave Helena a peace that money could never buy. Helena lived at Keith Hall for 34 years, longer than the 31 years she was trapped in her first marriage, as if her body and mind were finally allowed to rest. Legacy and the meaning of fake pearls. Helena Zimmerman lived at Keith Hall for another 34 years. 34 years of peace, 34 years free from being hunted for money, 34 years free from hiding debts, scandals, or humiliation, a number worth contemplating, because it was longer than the entire 31 years of hell that she had endured with William Angus Drogo Montagu. As if having escaped him, Helena's body and spirit were finally allowed to live on. Helena died on December 15, 1971, at Keith Hall, Scotland, at the age of 93. A rare longevity for a woman who had been drained financially and spiritually for much of her adult life. And that raises a chilling question. If Helena hadn't married William Montagu, how much longer would she have lived? How different would her life have been? But perhaps what matters more is not what she lost, what this story leaves behind. The 3 strings of imitation pearls that William bought in 1900, that never paid for, but have become the perfect symbol for it all. They look valuable, they reflect the lights of high society, they take the form of wealth, but inside, they are utterly empty, just like him. A title without money, a marriage without love, a man who lived by appearances and left behind only bills, debts, and hurt. Helena's father, Eugene Zimmerman, built his fortune with true courage, surviving torpedoes, facing war, making timely business decisions. It was this fortune that attracted predators, but Helena, by leaving that marriage, proved that she inherited not only her father's money, but also his power. It took her over 30 years to escape the trap of title, but the rest of her life, she lived in respect, peace, and true love. Helena Zimmerman's story is not just the tragedy of an heiress, it is a timeless warning. Titles can be fake, wealth can be exploited, but character cannot be bought. And sometimes the most glittering thing in life is just a fake pearl.